Hello, everyone. Welcome to another BookBase interview where we interview thriller novelist Carl Vonderau. Carl has previously worked in international banking and was an anti-money laundering specialist before he became an author. He is the author of two novels, and his most recent novel, Saving Miles, came out in 2023. If at any point you're interested in Carl's writing, please check out his website, carlvonderau.com, and sign up for his newsletter, as well as look him up on Facebook, Instagram at Carl Vonderau as well. And of course, if you enjoyed this interview, please like our video, subscribe, and of course, download the app. But Carl, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to BookBase, Nathan. And just so everyone knows, my name is kind of unusual. So my last name it's Carl with a C, and Vonderau is spelled Vonderau. So you don't get confused if you go to my website.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the clarification, Carl. And just starting off with our first question, your bio talks about you being a former banker and being a laundering specialist and, just having a background in banking. What made you want to become an author?
Well, I always was kind of a creative kid. I told ghost stories when I was a kid. I was in music and used to write songs in high school, and I wrote poetry. So I always wanted to be creative, but I also had to be practical. And I wanted to work internationally, so I became a banker. But the whole time I was thinking about, writing. And so eventually I sort of pursued fiction and took some courses secretly. No one at the bank knew about them. And learn how to, how some of the basic tools of writing fiction. And I've found I just enjoy it, and it gives me great meaning when I write.
That's a great story. If you don't mind me asking, when you were taking those courses,
Uh-huh.
what was one of the things that you learned that helped you being a fiction writer?
Well, here's something unusual that
Hmm.
not a lot of people talk about in writing courses. And the first course I took was from an Indian woman named Molly Ramanujan, and in Chicago. And in one of the classes, she said, "Look, what is really important in fiction are objects." You think, well, plot, objects. How are they important? Because an object really imbues character. So, for instance, you can have an object that has a positive meaning, like, for instance, I knew a guy in Chicago who his father died, and his father had this, I think it was a Mercedes. He kept it in a garage. He never drove it, but every once in a while he would go to the garage, sit in the Mercedes, and smell the cigar smoke from his father. So it's a way he connected with his father through that object. So, or, someone's journal from a negative side. How she someone has a journal to find out why her mother killed herself, but the journal is the important thing. So these objects can really communicate something. Here's a great one that I learned about from the Twin Towers and what happened in 9/11. It's a true story. So this woman had a birthday on September 11th, and her husband worked in one of the towers. I think it was in a brokerage firm there. So they were going to celebrate her birthday. He drove into the towers, and the towers collapsed, and she never saw him again. But a few weeks later, the people that were uncovering the rubble came across his car, and they didn't want to open the car without her being there because out of respect. So they brought her there, and they opened the trunk, and inside the trunk was a wrapped birthday gift, a card, and a single rose.
Oh man, Carl, you're starting this off with a teary
Yeah,
story. That's
isn't that
crazy.
isn't that great? I mean, you don't
Yeah,
need to say anything else but those objects, and you know immediately what that relationship was.
right.
So, right. So anyway, that's one of the things I learned.
Wow, that's actually a really great lesson. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that is important. And I think that's important for other forms of creativity as well, where, I have some friends that work in the film industry. And for
Mm-hmm.
them, objects and camera
Huge.
angles are so important because, you know, some people, they'll watch movies and they'll just think like, oh, that was a really pretty scene, but they don't realize that that scene was created by somebody that purposely planted every single thing in the way that we see it, like on the screen. And something as small as having a plant maybe in the corner, or having, you know, laundry in another side of the corner where
Mm,
you're living, you know,
yeah.
that kind of shows somebody's personality without them having to talk about themselves. Where if they have
Or
a messy room, maybe they're more of a
yes.
procrastinator, but if they have a
Yeah.
very clean room, okay, they're very organized, very tidy. So I think that's a really
Well,
great point.
and here in the best objects the teacher taught were the ones that were both positive and negative. They had the contradiction built into them, and you
Mm,
could see that from the example with the Twin Towers. For instance, somebody that dressed perfectly, you know, always in a suit, always no wrinkles in his suit, perfect tie, but his shoes were never shined.
mm,
It raises a question, and I think the film industry does that a lot.
right.
Also, I think because the film industry doesn't have the other senses to work with, not so much internal to work with, they have to pursue visual, you know, in, from all kinds of angles.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what we find in writing is that writers tend to use the visual sense too much, but there are all the other senses that really make a scene come to life. And smell is one of the most powerful ones, and it's incredibly complex when you think of all the smells there are in the world. Huge number of them. So, you know, touch, hearing, smell, all these senses besides the visual.
Right. No, that's another interesting point. You know, your relationship to the object as well, I think also paints, you know, a stronger picture of who this character is.
Yeah,
Um, and I think that really creates a more immersive experience for the reader as well when you are creating, you know, a world essentially that's made out of, you know, make believe, and you're trying to
yeah,
convince the reader like, hey, this is as real as it can be. Especially if you're doing something like a thriller or like a crime novel, like the way that you've been writing. You know, you have to do stuff like that to really make the reader feel like, okay, like this is really happening. You know, I'm engaged with the story. This
right.
kind of leads into our and the next question. But how has your experience as a former banker or, you know, money laundering, anti-money laundering specialist helped you with your novels? Because I know they are based on the main character either having some kind of experience with banking or being a banker.
Well, I was a banker for many, many years, and I worked, you know, in Chicago. I worked in Montreal, and then I worked in San Diego. So that all formed part of it. I was never part of the money laundering part of banking, but I took courses in it, and I became more of an expert, and some of it related to a field I used to be in, which was international trade. So I picked up on all of that in order to become more of an expert on it.
Got it.
What I find is that you know there aren't a lot of books that are centered on banking
Mm,
in crime novels, so it seemed like a milieu that hadn't been covered. But underneath all of that, you've got to have an emotional component to the book. So all my books are about crime, but they're really about the families that are affected by the crime. So they involve dysfunctional families who have to come together because of the crime in order to survive. And so there's an arc for the family growing and changing because of all of this.
wow, that's awesome. That reminds me of the show Narcos on Netflix. There's an
Mm-hmm.
interview by
Yeah,
the two directors, and they both talk about how one thing that they want to highlight is that in these stories that usually are glamorized and, you know, showing a quote unquote good side of, you know, a life of crime, this show, you know, the creators are like, I want to make sure that we highlight the damage as well that has been done and highlight the
yeah,
victims and the families that have had to dealt with some of the irresponsible choices that some other people make. And, you know, it's really interesting how your novels kind of take that same approach. And I think it also goes back to creating a more immersive story because it kind of shows a reflection of the events that happen in the story, that it does have a real cause and effect to the other people in the world. And it creates more of an engaging story. You know, speaking of stories, you know, your first novel, Murderabilia, I know it's won a couple of awards, and and it's been talked in high praise. What was your inspiration for this novel?
Mm. Well, I thought, okay, so you're a banker for the very wealthy, which was one of my jobs in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
Suppose a crime novelist, secrets are great sources for novels. So suppose this private banker had this secret that he didn't tell anyone. What would that secret be? Well, you think the what if kind of thing. Well, suppose his father was a serial killer and his mother had taken the family from where they grew up in Illinois to California, changed their name, and nobody knew that his father was a serial killer. His father is infamous. He's in prison. He took photographs of the women he murdered. This is this private banker's deepest and darkest secret. And then one day he's accused of murdering someone in the same way his father would do it. And the only way he can prove his innocence is to go back to see the father he hasn't seen for 30 years, so who would have insight on who might have done this killing. So, you kind of take these what-if scenarios.
Yeah, right. What an awkward family reunion, first of all. 30 years later, you walk in and you see him, you're like, this is awkward, but I think you're still out here.
Yeah, well, my background, my father had his hobbies, but one of them wasn't killing.
Right. Oh, man.
And so I had to do a lot of research
Mm-hmm.
on children of serial killers, and they have really hard lives.
Right.
Because it's a terrible stigma.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, can you imagine? Everyone looks at you and they say, how could you possibly love a monster like that?
Right.
Well, but you were a child, of course you loved that monster. And I remember reading about a woman in Russia, and her father had killed 50-some people. And she said, no, it was a fake. It never happened.
Oh,
50
wow.
people.
Yeah.
That's the kind of delusion you have to do in order to
Right.
reconcile yourself with this. Or, there was a woman who wrote a book, and her father was the Green River Killer.
Mm-hmm.
Or no, here's an even better one. The Kansas Killer. This woman grew up with him, and she went camping with him. He bought her ice cream. They go bicycling. He walked her down at her wedding. And then one day, the FBI shows up at her door and says, your father is this infamous serial killer. What does that do to your life? Your whole life feels like it was a lie. And this is the kind of stigma these poor people have to live under, and that's what really fascinated me with writing about it. It wasn't the killers, but the children, how they had to deal with this.
No, I think that's such a great approach towards wanting to create, again, like a more... I think it's to create, of course we talk about immersion, and that's been like kind of like the center focus so far of this interview, but I feel like it does something more than that. I feel like it does create a very interesting reflection where I think when you watch like a documentary, for instance, or a true crime documentary, you only see the victims for like around half the show. The other half is usually like a recollection, or it's like, actors remaking the scenes, like explaining what actually happened. But when that documentary ends, you kind of just let it out, like you let go of it, like you're in it, you watch the show, you look at everything, you're like, wow, this really is crazy, this sucks, and then you move on with your life. But there are people out here in the world that really live with relatives that were actually either directly impacted as they were the victim, or like in your case with your novel, you're actually related to the person that did this harm, and that's such a scary thing. And I could only imagine like the thoughts of confusion, even feeling guilt, feeling guilt for something you didn't even do, but hey, you're related to somebody that did this, and you have feelings for that person.
Yeah.
And, I think it's such an interesting aspect of your writing where you kind of delve into that. But I guess, like, it kind of makes me curious as to ask, like, what was your writing process like? And, I know you did your research, but did you reach any hurdles writing the novel, especially because, you're a banker, you're taking these fiction courses, you have these what ifs in your head. So it's like, I feel like you have the fuel for it. But when it actually came to creating this, what was that like? Like, were there there moments where you're like, oh my gosh, this is a really big task that I'm on to, or were you actually like, was it just more of a continuous process where you're like, oh my gosh, like this is easy, I can do this?
Oh, it's never easy. It's never easy. I mean, Murderabilia I wrote more than 20 times. And with Saving Miles, somewhere in the teens, and it's a I can talk about Saving Miles because there were a lot of challenges there. Um, First of all, my son, we sent him to a residential treatment center about 20 years ago, and he gave me permission to use, some of his experience in the book. Um, and so I wanted that to be something that underlaid the crime. And so here you have two parents that have had to send their kid to this residential treatment center. It's the hardest thing a parent ever has to do, and it tears marriages apart. So that's what resonates throughout the book with all three people in the book. But then, I wanted it to have something to do with money laundering. So I had to take courses and learn about money laundering. I lived internationally, so I wanted it to have something to do with Mexico and with Montreal, where I used to live. So that had to be in it. And then I thought, I wanted it in Tijuana, but I didn't know much about Tijuana. I live in San Diego, but I didn't know it that well. But I knew a lot of YMCA people in the Y in Tijuana, and they helped me find settings for the book. Where might somebody be kidnapped? Where do the rich people live? Where's the red light district part of it? Where would an orphanage be in Tijuana? So you pull all that together, and your first problem for a novelist is to come up with a premise that does that. So you want to hear my premise?
Yes, please.
Okay, there's a leading question, huh? How can you
No.
say no to that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm in. Yeah. I actually I already read the like the little insert on Amazon, like for the books, like for both
Yeah,
Murderabilia and
yeah,
Saving Miles,
yeah.
and I actually reached out to Jalen and I was like, yeah, these plots are actually kind of crazy. Like this is really cool, but please, like, no, yeah, please share that premise.
So next time you're at the bank and you got this banker sitting across from you, this is what he's really thinking about.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's either he's
so
related to a dead. I mean, he's either related to a serial killer, or we got the Saving Miles situation.
so so the premise is two parents have a really difficult time with their troubled teenager, so they have to send him to a residential treatment center. And when he comes back, he seems to be totally changed. He's getting straight A's and he's got a new outlook on life. But then he sneaks off to Tijuana to do a drug deal and gets kidnapped. No, the parents, the father is this, a very high profile banker in San Diego who's got a reputation. And the wife, she is separated from him because of all this turmoil with their son, and she works with a nonprofit. But in order to save their son a second time, they have to become involved with money laundering. And the father has to begin working with a very sketchy bank in San Diego. That's how you kind of pull it together.
That's crazy. I wonder like how many people out there in the world. That's crazy because if you actually want to like do a crime organization or something, I feel like one of the funniest things that people overlook are the finances. Like I
Yeah,
think that's such an important thing, especially if you're trying to do something to make money. Of course, accounting is always important in any industry and any company.
yeah,
But,
yeah,
I think that's such an interesting point of view. Like what if you're the accountant for a cartel or for a organization that does very like sketchy things, and
yeah.
I would definitely just stick to the books. I wouldn't even look out the window. I would just say, hey, you know what, if you want me to do your taxes, I'll do your taxes, but I'm not doing any of this other stuff. Like you guys can do whatever you want. So I think that's really scary because in the story, I'm assuming the father is doing whatever he can to save his son, but I'm sure his morality is compromised because you got to start thinking like, hey, what's more important? Like I love my child, but I'm also probably going to have my hands wrapped up in some really messed up situations, especially if you're working with a crime organization or if you're working with a sketchy bank. And
Yeah.
no, I can't wait. Like I think that would be such an interesting novel to read. I think that's definitely on my reading list.
Oh,
Um,
great. Well, I
yeah.
hope you like it. But he comes to the conclusion that now it's not only his son that's in danger, but his whole family.
Oh, right. Get everybody else wrapped up in
So,
it too.
yeah, so what do you do then? And do you go to the FBI or don't you? And these people have killed people, and the money laundering involved, it gets into some technical. It had to be a little simplified because nobody wants to read about money being passed from one LLC to a trust to a
Right.
foundation. I'm yawning just saying it. Uh, but there are elements involved in it. Like not many people know the estimate is that as much as 7% of international trade
Mm.
involves money laundering.
Wow.
They do these transactions to hide the movement of money, across borders, so nobody can trace it. And
Right.
now with cryptocurrency and with the restrictions being lifted, it's just going crazy
Right.
because cryptocurrency it's become much easier to launder money with.
Oh, absolutely. I still remember when Bitcoin was just starting to get like more of a
Oh
common
yeah,
thing to talk about. And when people would talk about mining, cryptocurrency, I thought like, Minecraft, like actually getting a pickaxe and digging in the dirt for Bitcoin. I'm like, mining, what does that even mean? And, people are like, oh, you got to get a computer and you have to like do all this stuff. And now it's become such a big thing. And, you can see like all the banks kind of freak out because now they're like, wait a minute, like, how does this work with our situation with what we have going on already? And I think that's such an interesting conversation. That'd be a great idea for another novel if you ever want to write a third one. Just talk about
yeah,
cryptocurrency because that's such a relevant thing now compared to
yeah.
how it used to be. And another idea is I think you'd be great at writing very awkward family reunions because this sequel, I mean, this Saving Miles novel would be the same thing. Even if I save my son, if I'm in the car with him and we're driving back, I'm not looking at him the same. Like, you got me in some really sticky situations, and you got your mom messed up in the back. You got other family members scared for their lives. But hey, what do you want for dinner? I guess we can pick something up on the way back. That's crazy.
The
Um,
Thanksgiving meal is pretty long.
right, that Thanksgiving meal would be so awkward. Everyone's cutting the turkey, and you're just making eye contact. No one's talking. You're just like, "What are you thankful for?" And you better say something. That's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's
what do you
really
do
funny.
when your wife didn't want to send him away and you did?
Right.
What does that do to a marriage?
Right, and then the son's just there, just thinking life that he's back because he got kidnapped, and the dad's like the stuff that I had to do just to fight your mom on this, and then I had to come get you. Like, oh man, yeah. Honestly, I think I'd celebrate Thanksgiving on my own that year. I think I would just be in my room and just I don't know order something online, but
Well, here's the thing though. This is interesting because these kids, uh, they are sent away, and thousands of these kids are sent to these programs all over the country.
right,
And what they do is they come back, and a lot of them, some of them reform and lead very successful lives, but others, they now have a much more sophisticated way to manipulate their parents because they have all the right terminology about, what they think, what they feel, the kids around them, and underneath they can get away with even more. So that's what happens in Saving Miles.
that's yeah, no, that I Oh man, another awkward aspect just to add to that Thanksgiving dinner. Like, if they even if my kid was like, I won't do it again, I'm still cutting the turkey. Like, I'm gonna make sure, like, you better not, you're staying here, buddy. You're gonna go to school here at a local high school or whatever, and you're gonna be working. But yeah, no, I mean, this kind of, before I forget, we're talking about novels and the writing process and stuff,
Sure,
but I know you
sure.
mentioned before the interview that you had a story about your publication story, about
Oh
getting your
yeah,
novel published, and I
yeah,
figured that would be a great segue into that
sure.
story if you don't mind sharing.
Oh, of course, yeah. So, of course, I had this idea for the son of a serial killer, and I was actively writing it. So I went to a writers' conference, and there, in what we did was we did these short pitches as to what the premise of your novel was about. And Jacqueline Michard was there, and she wrote this book called Deep End of the Ocean. It was the first pick that Oprah did on her book club. I mean, she made a lot of money from this book. She was very famous. So I said, can you recommend somebody that can be my developmental editor, help me and the big picture on this book? And she says, yeah, me. Yeah. So I thought, wow, wow. Well, as
Wow.
it turns out, she was the victim of a financial fraud and lost basically a lot of her money. So she needed to do editing. And so she helped me with the book. And then she introduced me to her agent who had founded this literary agency in New York. And I thought, God, I've really made it. I'm going to have a bestseller here. This is great. And this agency, I was kind of a minor league for them. And they'd have young people review the book and get back to me with feedback. But every time they reviewed it, it would take them 3 months. And we went at this for a year, and they never submitted the book anywhere. And then the agent said, I really don't think I'm the right agent for you. So here I am,
Oh
he's
my
dropped me.
gosh. Yeah, after a
Yeah,
year, right, of being on
after a
hold.
year. And I thought, oh my gosh, what the heck am I going to do? So I thought, well, I better first learn how to pitch the book. So I go to this conference in New York just on pitching a book. And the idea, as an author, you have to be able to get your book down to a single paragraph and then a single sentence. Why? Because when somebody publishes your book, they go to booksellers and they're pitching 30 or 40 books to these booksellers. So they got to give them a sentence that the bookseller can remember, and so that they hopefully buy the book. So you can't go on for 20 minutes about what your book is about. So I did that, and I got it down to a single sentence. And I thought, wow, gosh, this was expensive for this, but okay.
Every word is
And
a
then,
couple dollars for sure.
oh man, yeah. So okay, so I go to this conference in San Francisco,
Mhm.
this writers conference, and those of your readers might be writers, and they know, perhaps have been to these conferences, but they'll invite agents and acquisition editors from publishers to come to the conference to discover new talent. So everybody there is both to learn about how to write a book as well as hopefully find an agent or a publisher. So they have these networking sessions, and all us wannabe writers are kind of crowding around the agents and editors. Please ask me a question about my book. Please ask me. So this agent turns to me and she says, okay, describe your book in one sentence. I had it.
Oh, wow.
And I gave the sentence, and she and this acquisition editor beside her go, whoa. And that's like, you couldn't have a better reaction
Right?
as a writer than
Do you mind
that.
sharing what that sentence was if you
Sure,
remember? Like,
sure,
what did you say?
sure. Yeah, I mean, so a banker for the very wealthy has his life torn apart when he's accused of being a serial killer like his father. And it's the end that gets him, right?
Hmm.
That's where. And so it worked. And she became my agent, and she's still my agent.
Oh,
So,
wow, that's amazing.
yeah, yeah. But that's not the end of the story, unfortunately.
Oh, man, I hope it doesn't go any down. I hope there's no downhill turns. I hope it just goes up from
Oh,
there,
they're all
but.
the. I'm an author. There are lots of downhills.
Oh, man. I guess that's just something you have to accept if you're trying to work in this world,
Oh
right?
man, yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's a tough profession,
Hmm.
unless you're one of a million, who writes a book in a month and it goes out to auction and is sold in 2 weeks. But I don't know anybody that's had that happen to.
Right.
But so okay, so we sent it out to all. It's a dark book because the father he took pictures of the victims that he killed, and so went out to a lot of publishers. I don't know, 15 or 20, and nobody wanted it. And then finally, we found a good mid list publisher that wanted it. So we signed the contract. And 2 months later, the publisher's parent company said, we're going to get out of the mystery book field. We're closing this imprint. Well, what do you
Jeez.
do then?
Yeah.
So you start all over. But the imprint said, look, we will publish your book and we'll give it a lot of backing like we do any other book we publish. So we thought, okay, well, we might as well we'll do that because I didn't want to sell this book for another year, and I wanted to work on something else. So we did it, and the publisher really didn't do very much, but
Mm.
but the book then got nominated for an award, at Left Coast Crime, and this is a conference held every year on the West Coast somewhere, and it's got 700, 1,000 people that go to this conference, and it got nominated for Best Debut Book.
Wow.
So this is great, and even better, the conference was in San Diego. This is where I live. So I thought, well, I can promote it. I'll have people there that will know me. I've got a real good chance of, it's voted by the readers, of winning this prize.
Yeah.
So the conference starts, and the next day it's canceled because of COVID.
Oh my gosh. I forgot about the pandemic. Yeah, that's, oh man.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, am I just unlucky or what?
Right.
But it was voted virtually and it won the prize. So,
Congratulations.
and it had the conference gone on, as normal, maybe I wouldn't have won the prize. I don't know. And I ended up getting an agent who was a much better fit for me than the first agent was. So, you just keep grinding away and eventually you get lucky.
I think that's such a great story. Wait. Is that it? Because if
That's
there's
it.
more downhill...
Yeah,
Okay, I was about to say, watch something crazy happen after that. I'm like, oh gosh,
Yeah.
here we go. But, I really want to applaud you for not only the optimism that you seem like you carry when you talk about this story and the way that you go
Yeah.
about your journey being an author, but I also
Yeah.
applaud you for your determination to just keep on going. I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of people out there where you get dropped by your first agent, you're probably thinking, oh, maybe that's a sign I should stop. But you kept on going.
Yeah.
And, for you to go to these conferences to just learn how to pitch a book, I feel like that's a lot of work that a lot of people would initially not really see the value in. But right there, when you met that next, agency with that lady that was asking for that sentence, the fact that you were able to just be like, oh, I literally practiced this and just deliver it. I think that's really what was the saving grace. Is it was like all your experiences going up and down with trying to write this novel and trying to get somewhere with it. There's that one position where your hard work pays off, where you remember all the stuff you learned and you're able to deliver the right pitch, and then you get somebody that really believes in your vision, and that allows you to do the things that you love to do. And that kind of shows that it's sometimes in life it's more than just the want to do something. Sometimes there's hard work that has to come behind that, where, okay, if you want to do something that you're passionate about, that's amazing, but you also want to match it with hard work so that when that opportunity comes for you to actually showcase what you want, you do have the passion, but you've always had that. Now you can apply the skill set that you've gained along the way, which I think is what really is highlighted in this story, and that's amazing. So thank you for sharing that. That's such a great story.
Yeah, thank you. Well, you're absolutely right. And what I've realized is there are a lot of good writers out there.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are better than I am, and some of them are worse than I am. So my greatest skill is probably tenacity, and
Yeah.
and it applies to all writers. And I think something that also helps you a lot is you have to be deluded enough to keep having the dream.
Right. I think you have to be a little bit delusional when you're trying to sell a make-believe world to people. I think
Yeah, that's true.
I think there's a little bit of, because what you're doing, and this kind of goes with anything with like movies, even starting a company, you start off with the delusion that, hey, I want to create something that doesn't even exist yet. And then not only am I going to create it, but I'm going to convince you that this is actually worth something. That's almost like if you take that apart and you kind of just look at it, that's kind of like an act of a gesture, where it's like you're kind of doing a magic trick and you're convincing people that, hey, like this is actually happening, because you have to convince them. And then at some point, that magic becomes real, because then when you do gain that audience that values what you're doing, now it just becomes beautiful, because that delusion becomes reality, the company becomes real, the story becomes real, the book gets nominated for a bunch of awards because you're recognized for something that you've done, and you create such a important support base for something that you love doing. And I agree. This kind of leads into the next question, and I feel like you have so much to give to this, so I'm so excited to hear your thoughts. But what's your advice to new writers out there that want to release their first book, or maybe they're having struggles along the way, as we talked about with the downhills in life? What's your advice to those that want to just keep their head in the game and want to persevere with writing?
Well, for one thing, get feedback
Mm-hmm.
and don't send it out too early. We all, another delusion we all have is that this book is wonderful. And so we should send it out right away to agents, and it's really not ready. Most of the time, as a first time writer, it's not ready yet.
Hmm.
And you only get one chance
Right.
with each agent and each publisher for that book. So you got to make sure that it's really the best product you can put out there. So what does that mean? It means you got to be willing to rewrite and take criticism and have a tough skin. And where do you get that? So you can join a writers group, which really helps.
Mm-hmm.
And they exist in every city where be a group of writers, say in mystery, that or thrillers like me that and you join, and once a month or twice a month or every week you get together and read 10 pages or so of each other's work, and then you give them feedback. And what you find is, at least I found, is something that I thought was brilliant, I would have missed the boat completely on. And things that I thought were just okay were actually pretty good. So this is the kind of feedback you need. Now the drawback is it slows down getting the book finished, but you can end up getting a much better book.
Right.
Now the other problem, of course, is that you can't submit the whole book to a writers group except over a long period of time. So it's hard for them to get the complete picture of the book. Now, does the arc of the character, does it work, make sense? Is one character disappeared and they shouldn't have? Should you have drawn that character out more? Was there something about the plot that didn't make sense? All these characters, the tone it changed. The writing lagged in the middle. There are all these big picture elements you need. And for that, you need a developmental editor, which is somebody that you pay, or if you have writer friends that might be willing to do it, someone that goes over the whole book and says, these are the strong points and these are the weak points, and this is what you have to do to improve the book. You really need that at some
Mm-hmm.
point. So those are the two things. Oh, and also go to writers' conferences. In every major city, and it's worth flying to another city if you got the money. And at these conferences, you'll meet other writers. You'll learn some things about craft that you didn't know before. Or even if you knew them, it'll refresh your memory because, a lot of times I'll preach this stuff, excuse me, and then I'll look at my own work and I've done the opposite of what I've actually preached. So, you've got to refresh your mind and all of this stuff. A lot of these conferences will have agents there who are looking for new talent, and you can submit your first 10 pages and your premise to them and be able to talk to them for 10 minutes. And you can see, where your market is, what your genre is, and whether there's really any potential for your book. So there's over a few things that you can do. Just keep rewriting.
Mm-hmm.
The story I tell is about rewriting is you write a scene, and the first time you write it, it's okay. So then you rewrite it, it's getting better. The third time you write it, wow, if I can just sustain this is really good.
Mm-hmm.
The fourth time you write it, you go, there are prizes for writing this book.
Yeah.
And the fifth time is, this is crap. So
Right.
you have to have that kind of patience to
Right.
keep at it,
Yeah.
And my writing, a lot of people have if we want to get to writing process, I write
Mm-hmm.
every day, 7 days a week, but there's a difference between getting it down on that first draft and then rewriting it.
Mm.
So what I do for the first draft, or even before the first draft, I'll have a general outline, usually. With Murderabilia, it was really detailed, but not so much for Saving Miles. And then I'll have the idea of a scene, and I know what's precipitating the scene and what the conflict is. I don't necessarily know what the end of the scene is,
Mm-hmm.
but I will write it by hand on a legal pad. And I'll just write, I'm going as fast as I can. And when I'm in the flow, the scene is going faster than I can write. So it turns off the editor inside me, and I'll skip things that, it might be all dialogue. It might, some things might not make sense. I might leave out things. But it doesn't matter because I'm getting to the arc of the scene, and at the end, hopefully, have what the scene ends at. And then the same day, excuse me, I've got allergies too.
No, no worries.
The end of the day, or within 24 hours, I will try and type that scene into the computer. And then I'll do some of the first edits, fill in some things. Maybe the scene didn't begin on the first page, it began on the second page. And maybe I'll adjust the ending, maybe I'll have more ideas, but I've got down a little better first draft. And then you want to keep going.
Got it.
And not get too tied up in it. The other problem people have with writers groups is they'll write the same scene and bring it into the writers group 10 times, and then you never get beyond the first scene, right?
Right.
Or some scene in the book. So these are things you have to watch out for.
Yeah, it's a balance, right? It's a lot of balance between knowing when to dive in and check things out a second time and to let something go because, hey, it's good where it is and that's a strong suit that you have going on for you. And, that's also a difficulty is to recognize what, and you said this, but to recognize what you're good at and to also recognize what needs to be fixed. And there's a lot of tough skin that needs to be involved in that, but I think that's something I personally need to work on as well. I feel like if somebody were to say, yeah, this middle part of the book sucks, I'd be like, well, you suck, and I don't want to talk to you anymore.
What kind of idiot are you?
Yeah, like somebody's not getting the picture. Yeah, no,
you didn't get it. You really didn't get it, did you?
I need somebody else. I need to hire somebody else. Yeah, no, I think no, but that's really it's real advice because I think especially in a if you're trying to let yourself be expressed in a creative aspect, it's going to come with a necessary amount of criticism, especially if you want to hone in that creativity to be something that really speaks properly to what you want it to speak for. I think we all have a natural talent towards things, but I think it takes work to kind of hone it into something that can be to the level that we always dream for things to be, where you want it to be grand and you want it to be special.
Sure.
Yeah, so...
Well, here's another thing, too, that as you're writing, you may get a better idea, and this character may really come to life.
Right.
And you're spending too much time on a character that's not as vibrant.
Right.
So maybe that's a character you have to spend more time with, and maybe even it becomes the main character in the book.
Mm-hmm.
So that's depressing if you thought it was somebody else and you've written the whole book.
Right. Yeah, no, I could. Gosh, I think outlining is such a great idea. Then I think outlining kind of helps a little bit, at least, to kind of discover how well you're working with these pieces.
Yeah, I think outlining, you got to keep redoing the outline, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as you write, you come up with better ideas, and that changes the outline.
Right.
And then when you get a first draft, it's really a good idea to go back and do the outline again,
Mm-hmm.
and see how the pacing is in the outline. You can see what pacing has the most emotional components, and that they're mixed right. Are the points of view mixed right? Have you forgotten somebody because their point of view doesn't show up for 10 chapters?
Right.
You can look at those kinds of aspects of it.
Yeah.
Where's the midpoint of the book? Where did the character really change? If it's a hero's journey, when do they get that insight that helps them at the end of the book when it's all darkness?
Right. No, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think, that's one of my favorite questions to ask in an interview, because there's so much advice that one can give, and there's so many experiences that somebody can share on, their journey. And I feel like for writing and for letting yourself be out there for being an author and just trying to create something, it's sometimes a very daunting task. And I think it's a warm feeling when you hear the words of somebody else that was in your shoes, but they've just been working at it longer and they're where they are. And so I hope this encourages anybody that's watching this that wants to write something to a small setback doesn't mean that it's over. It just means that it's a small setback and we just gotta work around
well,
that.
And if you're stuck in a book, go to bed. maybe you'll think of it, or take a shower, or go to the gym. I can't tell you how many things I've thought of it at my spin class at the YMCA.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I get the same thing. I get the same thing when I go for my runs. I feel the same way. I also want to ask this, since we're talking about writing and stuff, what's in the future for
Mm.
you, Carl? Like, I know you
Yeah.
just in 2023 Saving Miles came out, but are you working on anything else, or like what's your process right now?
Well, we have another book that we've sent out to market. We haven't found a publisher for it yet.
Okay.
So, you keep your fingers crossed that,
Fingers crossed.
we're going to find it. And so I keep selling Saving Miles. I'm really proud of that book. It's got 3 points of view, and I'm very proud of it.
Yeah.
And then I've got another book I'm working on now, which I'm close to having finished.
Nice.
So
That's
so
great.
just keep working. Yeah,
So
yeah,
excited. I can't wait to hear it. And, this kind of leads into our final question. So I did talk to you about what BookBase is, but we're essentially, we're about creating a community around reading. And, I
yeah.
love asking this because, I feel like different authors, again, they share different perspectives on this. But what do you think is important about socializing around books, especially in a time where maybe not a lot of people read as much as maybe people in the past used to, with technology and all these developments that we see outside in the world? But have you ever been a part of a book club, or in your
Yeah.
opinion, like, how do you feel about socializing around books?
I think it's great because I think in many times you can be more real in fiction
Mm-hmm.
than you can be in nonfiction. I kind of point toward fiction. And in a book club, you get insights into a book that from other people that you didn't get when you read it. And sometimes I've gone to I'm part of a book club now, and I used to be part of an all male book club, which was interesting. And I sometimes I'd go into the book club and I wouldn't like the book, and then I listen to everyone around me, and I suddenly like the book. So because I just missed it, or I'll have insights in other people. So I think it's important because we certainly have the perspective now that people aren't reading as much, and particularly young people. But I think they're much more on their phones. But when they're on their phones or when they're in video games, they are reading. But I think the big picture of fiction and books is something it gives you something that you can't get in any other medium. So
Yeah.
I think that's great. And as for writers, you want to socialize because you need the support from other writers. We're all marketing as writers now, so you need that because it's a lonely profession. You're in your room all by yourself. You're married maybe, and your wife or your husband.
Yeah.
What are you doing in that room all
Yeah.
by yourself for so much time?
Right.
It's like having an affair without having a partner.
Right, right. And you're not even eating
Yeah.
dinner. You're just stuck in that room just writing. You're not even coming
Yeah,
out
you're
for
only
anything.
thinking about
You're
that,
just thinking about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I think what BookBase is doing is great because the more discussion you have, and the more you can turn people on to other great books. Because if you both liked the same book, and for a lot of the same reasons, then that person is going to have some recommendations that you really like.
Right.
And you go on Goodreads or Amazon and you see a lot of 5-star reviews, but that doesn't mean you're going to like the book.
Right. That's true. That's true. I definitely agree with you. I do think that, BookBase could be the hub where people can really give personal recommendations instead of it being
Yeah.
more of a generic, hey, 5 stars, good book, definitely check it out. I think it creates a more deeper connection when you do end up liking something because it's like, wow, this person really understands me. And I feel like I could really enjoy something that, this person also recommended me. And, I think that's great. That's a beautiful connection.
And you might make a friend that,
Right?
you wouldn't have had otherwise. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, Carl, this has been such a great interview. Thank you so
It's
much
been
for.
fun. It's great.
No, it's been great. I think you've
Yeah.
said so many great, moments. You've shared so many great moments of wisdom, and you've shared such interesting, outlooks on not only life, but the determination that goes into expressing yourself, and even the fun of just writing a story that you've wanted to write. I think that's such a great thing to hear in authors when they talk about their stories, and you definitely
Yeah.
showed it. I love it, and for those those that are watching this interview, again, please check out his website. Check out his newsletter on his website as well, carlvonderau.com. On Facebook, it's the same name, and on Instagram. And please check out his novel, Saving Miles. Please check out his debut novel, Murderabilia. And yeah, Carl, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just a couple of things. If you have a book club and you'd like me to speak to your book club, I love to do that.
Okay.
So, just contact me through the website. And also on the website, I found that I've done work with nonprofits and business people who don't know how to tell a story. So I did a primer on how to tell a story. What are the elements that you should consider when you tell a story anywhere?
Mm-hmm.
And when you subscribe to my newsletter, you can get a free copy of that. So,
Thank you,
little,
Carl.
little marketing.
Yeah, no, of course. What a great way to end this interview. But alrighty then, thank you so much. And again, guys, if you love this interview, please like our videos, subscribe, download the app, check us out on other social media channels as well. Might as well throw in our marketing as well. So thank you guys so much.
Oh, I think BookBase is a great idea, and thanks so much, Nathan, for having me on.
Thank you so much, Carl. That really means a lot.